The moment he took the microphone from the DJ, smiling like he was about to make a toast, I felt something cold slide down my spine, an instinctive warning that whatever came next would change my life forever. If you enjoyed this short revenge story, subscribe to our YouTube channel Quiet Revenge Story to watch the full long video. Like, share, and comment your opinion below, and tell us where you're watching from. I remember how tight my fingers were around the stem of my glass, how the soft lights above the banquet hall blurred into trembling stars. Everyone thought this was it, the celebration before vows, before forever. My dress wasn't white yet, but it might as well have been. I had chosen it carefully, imagining how he'd look at me when I walked down the aisle in a few weeks. That same man now stood just a few feet away, clearing his throat, enjoying the attention. He laughed first, a small, casual laugh. The room followed, because laughter is contagious when people don't know they're about to be hurt. "I don't think I can go through with this wedding," he said lightly, as if announcing a change in dinner plans. At first, my brain refused to understand the words. They floated in the air, meaningless, harmless. I even smiled, thinking it was a joke, some poorly planned surprise. I searched his face for the familiar softness, the look he used to give me when it was just us. Instead, I saw something sharp, almost relieved. The room went quiet. Pain has a sound, and it's not a scream. It's that sudden absence of noise when reality drops. He kept going. "I've realized I deserve better," he said, eyes scanning the guests before landing on me. "I mean, look at her, always trying so hard, always grateful I chose her." He shrugged. "It's pathetic." Pathetic. The word hit harder than the breakup itself. It pressed into my chest, stealing my breath, squeezing every memory we had shared until they felt cheap and embarrassing. My ears rang. I could feel people turning toward me, their pity crawling over my skin like insects. I wanted to disappear, or wake up, or shatter into something too small to be seen. I thought of the nights I stayed up late helping him rehearse presentations, the way I reassured him when his business almost failed, the sacrifices I never listed because love wasn't supposed to keep score. In that moment, every quiet act of devotion twisted into proof against me. Maybe I really had been pathetic, loving without armor, trusting without conditions. My legs shook, but I didn't move. I couldn't. The pain was heavy, physical, like my bones had turned to wet sand. Somewhere in the room, someone dropped a fork. I heard a whisper. Someone else coughed, awkward and loud. He finished with a final blow, delivered calmly. "I just thought everyone should know before she embarrasses herself walking down the aisle." That was when something inside me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically. It was a silent fracture, deep and clean, the kind that doesn't bleed right away. I nodded. I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct, or pride, or shock. My body was still performing the role of a woman who had control, even as my heart collapsed inward. I set my glass down carefully so no one would see my hands shaking. Pain isn't always tears. Sometimes it's the terrifying clarity that comes when you realize the person you loved never really saw you at all. As I walked out of that hall, every step felt like I was leaving pieces of myself behind, on the polished floor, in the echo of his laughter, in the stunned silence of people who would remember this night forever. I didn't know it then, but this pain was only the beginning. I didn't make it far before the whispers caught up with me. They followed me out of the hall, down the marble steps, and into the night air like a swarm that fed on silence. No one stopped me. No one called my name. Their restraint hurt more than if they had chased me, because it felt like agreement. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone was already vibrating. Messages, notifications, missed calls. Someone had posted the video. His voice, clear, confident, calling me pathetic, echoed from my own screen when I accidentally tapped it. The camera angle caught my face in perfect detail. The frozen smile, the confusion, the moment my eyes dimmed as the word landed. Strangers zoomed in, slowed it down, analyzed it like entertainment. "Wow, she didn't even cry. She looks dead inside. He dodged a bullet. She must have done something." Each comment stripped away another layer of dignity. The pain I'd been holding back now had witnesses, judges, and a running commentary. By morning, people I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me, not to ask how I was, but to satisfy their curiosity. What really happened? Was it true? I always felt something was off about you too. At work, conversations stopped when I walked into the room. At the cafe near my apartment, the barista hesitated before saying my name. Even sympathy felt humiliating. It reduced me to a story, a cautionary tale, a woman publicly discarded like a defective product. What hurt most wasn't that he left. It was that he chose to destroy me while leaving. He didn't just end our wedding, he rewrote my identity in front of an audience. I was no longer myself. I was that woman. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, scrolling until my eyes burned. Every post felt like another slap. Every laugh emoji reopened the wound. And somewhere between the cruelty of strangers and the silence of people who claimed to love me, I learned a brutal truth. Humiliation doesn't come from being hurt. It comes from being hurt publicly and being expected to accept it quietly. I tried to tell myself it would pass, that the internet would get bored, that tomorrow there would be a new scandal, a new victim. But humiliation doesn't fade when the crowd leaves. It lingers in private moments, in reflections you can't avoid. I stopped going out unless I had to. Every laugh behind me felt directed. Every glance felt loaded. I replayed that night over and over, my mind cruelly editing it each time, imagining better responses, sharper words, a version of me who stood taller, spoke louder. But the truth was, I had been blindsided. And the world doesn't forgive shock. It mistakes silence for weakness. My ex didn't reach out, not once. Instead, he leaned into the narrative he'd created. Mutual friends quietly unfollowed me and openly supported him. I heard through others that he was finally being honest and that I was too fragile to handle it. Fragile. Another word that stuck like a label I couldn't peel off. The worst moment came a week later when I ran into his sister at the grocery store. She looked at me with something like pity mixed with relief. "Maybe this is for the best," she said softly. "You always seemed dependent." I smiled. Again, that same automatic response. My face still hadn't learned how to show the truth. When I got home, I locked the door and slid down against it, my chest aching with the weight of everything I hadn't said. I realized then that humiliation had done its job perfectly. It hadn't just embarrassed me, it had isolated me. It had taught everyone how to see me, and worse, it had started teaching me how to see myself. But deep under the shame, beneath the self-doubt and the grief, something else was forming. Quiet, unnoticed, a thin, steady resolve that didn't need an audience. I didn't know what it would become yet. I only knew I was done explaining myself to people who had already decided my worth. I stopped responding. At first, it was exhaustion. My thumbs hovered over the screen, then lowered. Every explanation felt like begging for a trial where the verdict had already been decided. So I let the messages stack up. I let assumptions breathe without correcting them. Silence became my shield, thin but necessary. People mistake silence for defeat. They think if you don't speak, you agree. They don't understand that sometimes silence is survival. I went to work, did my job, came home. I deleted social apps from my phone, but not from my life. Screenshots still found their way to me. His smiling face at parties. New captions about choosing peace and knowing your worth. He never said my name again. He didn't need to. The damage was already done. In the quiet, grief finally had space to speak. I mourned the future I had rehearsed for years. The house we planned, the children's names we debated, the life that now felt like a story I'd misread entirely. I cried without witnesses, without commentary, without shame. Each tear felt like it washed something poisonous out of me. Then something unexpected happened. Without the noise, I started hearing myself again. I noticed how much lighter my days were without managing his moods. How often I had shrunk my opinions to keep peace. How love, real love, was never supposed to require humiliation as proof of honesty. I began saying no to things I didn't want. I stopped apologizing for existing. I signed up for a certification I'd postponed for years because it made him uncomfortable when I talked about outgrowing him. The irony didn't escape me. Silence gave me clarity. It stripped away who I was trying to be for others and left behind who I actually was. Hurt, yes, but intact. And somewhere in that quiet reconstruction, I realized something important. I didn't need to defend myself. The truth didn't require a microphone. And when the time came, my response wouldn't be loud. It would be undeniable. The shift didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic moment, no announcement, no sudden glow-up that made people gasp. Power, I learned, moves quietly, especially when it's real. I finished the certification, then another. I started staying late at work, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. For the first time in years, my effort was going somewhere that belonged entirely to me. When my manager noticed, it wasn't with surprise, but respect. A promotion followed, then a raise. Small wins stacked carefully, like bricks forming a foundation no one could kick out from under me. Meanwhile, the world kept watching him. At first, he enjoyed the attention. He leaned into it, posting about freedom, about dodging mistakes, about choosing himself. But narratives age quickly when they're built on cruelty. People began to notice the pattern, the subtle insults, the way he always had to be right, the stories that never quite lined up. I stayed silent. That silence did something interesting. It created space. And in that space, people started filling in the gaps on their own. A coworker pulled me aside one day and said quietly, "I never believed what he said. I just didn't know how to say it." Others followed. Apologies arrived, not loud, not public, but sincere. The balance had shifted. I wasn't chasing validation anymore, and somehow that made it find me. Invitations returned. Opportunities expanded. I walked differently, shoulders back, eyes steady. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had recovered something essential, my self-respect. And the strangest part, I no longer cared what he thought. That's when true power arrived, not as anger, not as bitterness, but as indifference sharpened by clarity. I had rebuilt myself beyond his reach. He just hadn't realized yet what that meant. The message came late on a Tuesday, months after the night he shattered me in public. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen longer than I expected to, not because my heart leapt, because it didn't, but because I recognized the timing. His name had started appearing in conversations again, not as admiration, but as caution. A failed business deal, a reputation quietly unraveling. People were seeing what I'd been too close to notice for years. I agreed to meet, not for closure, for balance. We sat across from each other in a small cafe, the kind of place where conversations blend into background noise. He looked older, not wiser, just worn. His confidence, once loud, now felt rehearsed. He started talking immediately, apologies wrapped in explanations. Pressure. Fear. "I didn't mean to hurt you like that." The word that did a lot of work, minimizing months of humiliation into a single moment. I listened, calm, steady, silent. Then I slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents he recognized instantly. Contracts, emails, proposals, the startup idea I had helped build in the shadows while he took credit, the investors he lost when I quietly withdrew my support and my silence, the clauses he hadn't read carefully, the ones that protected me. "I never needed to say anything," I said evenly. "I just stopped saving you." His face drained of color. He realized then that my response had already happened, not in words, not online, not in public spectacle. It had unfolded slowly, deliberately, while he was busy enjoying the echo of his own voice. I stood up, leaving him with the truth he couldn't argue with. My revenge wasn't loud. It was legal, it was ethical, and it was irreversible. I didn't look back as I walked out of the cafe, not because I was afraid of what I'd feel, but because I already knew. There was no rush of triumph, no surge of victory, just a deep, quiet certainty that something had finally settled into its rightful place. In the weeks that followed, the truth finished what silence had started. His deals fell apart one by one, investors talked, partners compared notes. The same charm he once used to disarm people now sounded hollow, rehearsed. Patterns emerged, stories aligned, and without me there to cushion the impact, his own words began to weigh him down. No one asked me to speak publicly. No one needed me to. Justice doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it arrives as recognition, the slow, collective understanding of who someone really is. The narrative corrected itself, not because I forced it to, but because lies can only outrun the truth for so long. One afternoon, I received an email from a woman I didn't know. She had been briefly engaged to him after me. She wrote simply, "I saw what happened to you. It helped me leave sooner. Thank you for surviving it." I sat with that for a long time. What he had done to me didn't just hurt, it revealed. It exposed a cruelty that might have stayed hidden if I'd played along, if I'd protected his image at the cost of my own dignity. By walking away, by choosing silence and growth over spectacle, I had done more than reclaim myself. I had broken a cycle. I was no longer the woman from that video. No longer the frozen smile, the whispered pity, the label he tried to give me. I was someone who endured humiliation without becoming cruel. Someone who chose restraint over retaliation. Someone who learned that the strongest response isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming undeniable. The wedding never happened, but something far more important did. I married my self-respect. I committed to my future, and I walked away knowing that while he tried to break me publicly, I rebuilt myself so completely that the world eventually saw the truth, without me ever having to say a word.